Thank you. Grab some water, and I will have you come back to the stage in a couple minutes later. All right, that was a truly enlightening session from Kooshaba. Thank you. As we delve further, we are excited to bring you to our next panel, which is Reconcile. Reconcile the ambition for autonomous world. So we have a fantastic lineup joining for the panel. We will hear Loaf from Dojo, David Amor from Playmint, Kevin Zhang from Curio, and again, Kooshaba from Lattice, moderated by Simon from IOSG Ventures. They will explore the intricacy of building the realm of autonomous world. So expect a lively debate on scaling developer experience and what it takes to bring autonomous world to life. And let's get it started. So our panelists, feel free to come up.
All right, so hello everyone, my name is Simon. I'm an investor at IOSG. I take care of gaming deals majorly. So it's a great honor to have you guys here. First, I want to start with maybe we can start with a brief self-introductions. Just tell us more about yourself and also the project you're working on. Any new updates or release you want to highlight. Now it's the time. All right.
Hey, I'm David. I'm the CEO of Playmint. We've been building fully on-chain games for over a couple of years now. The game that we've been working on most recently is one called Downstream, and we'll be demoing that here over the next couple of days. I'm from the games industry, so I've made lots of PlayStation and mobile and PC games, yeah, been sort of Web3 games for a couple of years.
Hello, I'm Loaf. I'm one of the core contributors of Dojo and one of the core contributors of the Realms ecosystem building on Starknet. I've been building on-chain games for a couple of years now as well. Right now, we actually just launched our first on-chain game on mainnet called Loot Survivor. Anyone can play that. And there's, within the Realms ecosystem, we're building another game called Eternum, which is still in early development. But I come from a background of just full stack engineering, been a long time crypto kind of nerd, and yeah, I got bitten by this bug end of 21.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin, one of the co-founders for Curio. I've been building on-chain games for around 2 years now. We're first and foremost a game studio and games company, so we're a small team building our first kind of social diplomacy game. And then in addition to that, we're also building our infrastructure product called Keystone, which is I think our unique take on what it is to combine kind of a blockchain with a traditional games architecture, games-proof architecture, to get both kind of the composability but also the performance that we think we'll need for the next wave of users. Yeah.
Yep, Kooshaba again. Hello. I work at Lattice. Sure. I also worked at Dark Forest before Lattice, so that was my first foray into on-chain game development. Before that, I was a solo developer on my own game that I launched, traditional game. And I work on Skystrife. Skystrife is an on-chain RTS. And hey, yeah, swing by our Discord. We play all the time. We play like every Friday. There's going to be a tournament later this week. And we are going to launch it when it's ready. I don't know when that is yet.
Okay. Cool. So I want to spend the first half of our discussions on the content aspect of autonomous world, because I think infrastructures and ecosystem are important, but at the end of the day, all have to come down to the actual product or the game or the experiments that you're building, right? So like the first question is pretty simple. So what fully on-chain games you think are fun? Why are they fun? And how can we make them more fun? Right, so can you share a bit about your own gameplay experience?
Big question.
You are open to like share your own projects. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're still generally in a stage with fully on-chain games where they're not at parity with traditional games. I think, you know, we're building on less mature infrastructure. But I think that since I've been building fully on-chain games and looking around the other games, including SkyScribe, that you can see that the quality level is increasing month on month. So I think, to me, I think it would be a mistake to try and just replicate games that you could run off blockchain, on-chain. So for us in downstream, we think it's important to focus on what the extra things that being fully on-chain games adds. But I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think we're still discovering the most fun aspects of on-chain games. We're in the experimentation phase, but there's, you know, very developed games like SkyStrife, which is you know, we're just pushing the boundaries. But yeah, I'm here to build games that are, you know, can't really be built, you know, in a traditional sense. So I mean, the one game, the Loot Survivor game that we just deployed, you know, it's a very novel, basic experience. It's basically revolves around it. The idea is an immutable arcade that will exist on the chain forever. It's not really a gigantic autonomous world. It's more just a game that exists like an old dusty Donkey Kong machine. Anyone can play it, and your high score will be there forever. And it's just like one little experiment, you know, focusing on one narrow use case right now. And we think it's pretty fun. There's quite a few people addicted to it. So, you know, it's just it's pushing on one little experiment. But yeah, I think we have a long way to go, and a lot more experiments to do.
Yeah, I think yeah, I would say for us, like, we started tinkering around end of 2021, and then in the beginning of this year, we launched this kind of demo called Treaty, which is kind of this social strategy game, but players write smart contracts that represented these kind of like political agreements with other nations within the game. And I think for us, after that experiment, there's like two very clear value props of on-chain games. I think one is just composability, and then two is just the high stakes element of crypto games. I think this is something that everyone in the space, I think, should lean into more as a way to acquire users, or I think just add more kind of fuel to the fire, especially for strategy games, which is what most people are building in the space. So I think those are kind of the two vectors that we're pretty focused on. And then I'm sure we'll talk about infrastructure and how we're trying to focus more on those vectors and maybe less on the other ones. Yeah.
So I'll shill not my project. I got super addicted to Words 3, which was launched earlier this year on base mainnet. It was like infinite Scrabble on chain, and then you could play any letter at any time, but each letter was the price of it was determined by a VRGDA. It was pretty unhinged. I spent a lot more money than I expected, and I ended up losing most of it. But yeah, I lost the whole weekend to that, and I reflected after that. I played that game, and I was like, okay, this could have never existed outside of a blockchain. So that was pretty exciting. I'm glad we're seeing experimental projects like that. I'm not super bullish on like how high stakes that was. I don't think anyone other than like a blockchain nerd would have spent a ton of money on that. But yeah, it's exciting. Also, I had a lot of fun playing another game that we made at Lattice, which was OP Craft. It was like a Minecraft clone designed to stress test the OP stack. But we really got the game loop down of like breaking a block felt very satisfying. And I don't really want to forget about that in on-chain games. Like, I think every little minute interaction should still feel good, even though secretly there's a giant, you know, Rube Goldberg machine of a blockchain like calculating your information. But yeah, it was like a very visceral feeling of just building and mining and exploring in a game, which I was excited about. And then it was fun that as a programmer, I could then go in and like write an infinite diamond miner in my free time rather than actually having to walk around like a plebe and mine myself. So I guess that is the composability aspect, where it's like, okay, I can put extra effort in, learn how to code, and then like have more capabilities.
Got it. All right. So the next question is about, so I think like in traditional game design, like typically error interactions and entities somehow predefined by humans, right, by the game designer. But however, AW brings a very different approach in designing games and creating fun. However, I also got this counter argument from friends in traditional gaming saying, fun can only be carried out in a centralized manner. As a game designer, you have to play God, and a very detail-oriented and careful God. You have to lay out every single details of the imaginary world you are creating, right? From your perspective, how do you think about this counter argument, and how can we really carry out high-quality gameplay in FOCG, right?
Someone else start.
Yeah, sure, happy to start. I think, I think there's merit to both approaches, but I think we are more aligned on, the core game. I mean, if you want this game to have a kind of a bottoms-up behavior, there's a lot of conditions that have to be met. Your community has to be very good, or there has to be very strong financial incentives for people to build on top of the game, whether it's through composability or people are building dashboards or alternative clients or whatnot. So a lot of these preconditions have to be met. So a large chunk of that work still has to be, I think, whoever's the core developers behind the game making a lot of effort on making the base game really fun. So I think this is also kind of how we're approaching this, I think in multiple phases, where I think the first phase will take the longest, which is the most high risk, just getting the core loop there. And then only after that, I think we'll have people build on top of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about this a little bit differently than other people building autonomous worlds, I believe. Because Skystrife is, I'm just going to talk about Skystrife, that's all I know. And even Dark Forest. The PvP competitive aspect of the game was pretty much enshrined in the protocol. That could not be modified. You couldn't really build on top of that and change it in any way. And I think that's what made it competitive and fun. It's you don't want to be rugged in the middle of your Skystrife match because this unit is behaving completely differently this time because someone deployed some contract that changes it. So I believe in enshrining some part of your protocol and saying this is the baseline. You cannot change this, but build whatever you want on top of this. And for something like Skystrife, that means you want to build an on-chain tournament system that organizes matches? Sure, go for it. We have no control over that. Or if you want to build a game that gets played alongside Skystrife, uses the same map and uses the same units, doesn't touch the underlying protocol, but you use your own storage and your own ranking system, go for it. But the base Skystrife game, I guess, is not centralized, but it is enshrined in the same way that a traditional game is, where it's you can come, you can play the vanilla game every day, it's not going to change out from under you.
I want to come back to your friend's question, which, as I understand it, is you can't have a game that you need to be centrally designed and managed, maybe. And of course, that is how games have been for the last 30, 40 years. But what if that's the frame of reference. But what if that's not true? I think we're trying to build something different here. Is it possible to create a game that is godless? It isn't operated by somebody centrally. And there's no frame of reference for that. So it's easy to say, no, that's not possible. But if it were possible, then what would that look like? And I think we're trying to do something different here and challenge that. And he may be right. It may be that you do need to have some degree of centralization. But what if it's possible to create something that's genuinely godless? Because then I think that's something brand new that the world hasn't seen, and we're in the business of doing brand new things. So I think it's our job to challenge the status quo there.
Yeah, I think I like to think of it as the minimum viable physics of a world, and we can talk about building a world or a game. And I think games exist within worlds, and so you can start with a game, and which is basically the MVP, the minimum viable physics of the world, and then from that people can build. But then the question is what is that MVP? Is it enough to kickstart the world and get it going? And so the way we went through the first game that we built was crazy complex and just insane. And then we dialed everything back, and we've been focusing on this idea of MVP, and we're just kind of laying this groundwork of production of assets within the world, transport of these assets, and these are the enshrined systems of the world. These are the base physics that you can't edit, but you can extend them, or you can add more systems on top. And so we're trying to think of what's the absolute minimum. But if you have that absolute minimum, then people have an incentive to come and build, these other experiences in the world because they know they will exist forever. So yeah, that's how I'm kind of thinking about it.
Cool. All right. So let's get back to our topic, which is the infrastructure. So it's more about how can we reconcile our ambitions for autonomous world with all those challenges in mind. So the first question is, what do you think are the problems with current tech stack for on-chain games? Which one is the priority if you need to address them?
Yeah, I'd start with a high level. I'm the least technical person on the panel, I think, so I'll give a sort of high level and then you guys can get into the weeds. I mean, what I see is, and Andy was talking about it on the previous presentation, that to create the kind of games that we normally make, the blockchains don't have that amount of throughput, so you either have to build a game that doesn't use that amount of throughput or find some infrastructure or systems that allow that to happen. And a year ago, that was a lot worse than it is today. And if I continue to draw that line, I believe that it's going to get better with L2s and L3s. And it feels like a combination of technology that the games are building combined with infrastructure that's getting better around us means that some of those problems are less of a problem than they were a year ago.
I think if we really want to build these autonomous worlds, and as Andy was talking about, we want this, we want this hardness, we want to remove the centralization. I think the solution is using ZK and not really trying to focus on a fully decentralized node network. And if we use ZK and we can just verify the compute, we can build these worlds and we can build a hardness into them without sacrificing the hardness, because we don't need the decentralization. But in terms of the infrastructure, I think we're it's evolving very fast. I mean, everybody on this panel right now has developed something to solve this problem. So, and we're all kind of converging on a similar idea. In the next 6 months, next 12 months are going to be very exciting.
Yeah, I want to add to that, which actually is something that your business partner Yijia said, which is that if you're building an on-chain game and not building some infrastructure as well, then you're probably not building it right. I think everybody we're not at a point where you can just take something off the shelf and build a game on top of it. You sort of have to get into the weeds, but that's just the stage of evolution that we are in autonomous worlds, fully on-chain games right now.
Yeah, I think from our experience, like after tinkering around with just purely smart contract-based games for around a year after end of 2021, I think there was like 2 distinct paths that we can go with the infrastructure. I think, and those 2 paths correspond very clearly to 2 types of users that we're kind of constrained by. I think, we could either keep on building fully on-chain games in the sense that they're fully smart contract-based, so whether it's like through Mud or Dojo, things like that, and deploying them on kind of public blockchains, that's one path. And there's certain trade-offs there, and there's like stronger guarantees on, I think, decentralization and autonomy and all that. And I think the second path was basically if we wanted to, in the future, kind of, I think, usher in more of the like Web2 users who have kind of higher expectations for latency, and then also, I think, less expectations for other things on the trade-off curve. We wanted to go another way, and we've decided to kind of go the second way. So I think generally I would love to see if there was kind of more experimentation on the base substrate that these games are deployed on. I think so far most games have been deployed on kind of public blockchains that have not really been heavily modified to fit the games. But I think this is a trend that we're increasingly seeing in crypto as well, where whether it's like DeFi companies or games or whatnot, like we're building more of this kind of like custom hardware and custom infrastructure at the lowest level to fit the needs. And obviously all these designs come with different types of trade-offs on the types of users that these games are offering their services to. So certainly there's no like right kind of answer, but I think that part of the design space just hasn't been explored enough, and I think it certainly will.
Yeah, I am EVM maximalist because of the, just pragmatically, it's been around for the longest time, the most people are using it, and I still think there's so much performance we could squeeze out of it. Like there's if you're working at every layer of the stack, if you're working at the node level, you're working at the smart contracts, you're working at the indexer level and the client, there's still so much more throughput we can get there. So I'm not ready to abandon it yet. I'm going to keep going, and I'm all in on optimistic roll-ups as well. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And the other aspect I really like to focus on personally is just latency. Because like when I go home and I play games that I enjoy, I'm playing first-person shooters with 140, 160 tick rate. We are nowhere near that on-chain, and no matter what, I'm always going to go to those games to get that visceral feeling of fun, or that visceral feeling of competition, or to really just feel like I'm in a world, like in a different world, and like that barrier between me and the experience is very small. So I like to focus on just like straight up response time in Skystrife. Like we're still hovering around 3-second response time from like user click to seeing anything respond on their screen, and I still think that's disgusting. So there's so many things we could do at every level to improve that experience.
So would you put energy into reducing 3 seconds down to something smaller, or would you just build a different game?
I still want to keep going smaller. Like I want to get that down to like 100 millisecond response times. Like, you know, if you're 100 milliseconds away from the server, or the sequencer in this case. And I know your Playmint has somewhat solved this with the sub-block indexer, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I suppose if you're talking about 100 millisecond, what do you call it, tick rate, then that's not that different from a high ping in a first-person shooter, is that right? So you're getting close at that point, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, response time and tick rate are different, right? Like if I'm updating my game once every 10 times a second, yeah, I can't play Counter-Strike on that. You know, that's true. Yeah, it's gonna suck. Yeah.
All right. Anyone want to? All right. Cool. So I think specifically for scaling as a problem, what do you think are the bottlenecks, and how did you your project address them? Because I think at the end we were trying to create a game that can host maybe 1 million players. How to achieve that?
Right. About scaling is the question. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we've jumped around Playmint, we jumped around different chains. We started on Ethereum mainnet. That's a slow and expensive chain to build a game on, as it turns out. And so we moved to Starknet, then to Polygon, currently. And a change for us, we're currently on OP Stack, but a app-specific version of that. And that's worked out well. I mean, Optimism is a great chain, but specifically the fact that we're on an app-specific chain, so we can just worry about what's happening on our chain without, and we're free to sort of turn that on and off, and we'll just settle down to Ethereum ultimately. So that's how we're addressing scaling, is using an app-specific chain plus doing some game-side optimizations.
Yeah, I think we can horizontally scale L3s. I think it would be nuts to try to put 1 million people on one chain. It just wouldn't work. It's like putting 1 million people on one server. You can't really do that. And we're there now, really. We can build these L3s and horizontally scale. And I think these L3 networks should be as easy to spin up a smart contract. And we're actually there with the Dojo stack. Right now, you can spin up it's not an L3 really, but there's a few more problems to solve in terms of that scaling problem, which is bridges and some kind of recursive scaling verifier on Starknet. But within 6 months we'll be there, and then once that happens, say you're a game, you can just do the sequencer is called Katana. You just do Katana up. You have a chain running in literally like 30 seconds, and you can deploy your game onto it, and you can share it around, and then you can destroy it when your game's finished, and you can settle the state back to Starknet, and then you can reconstruct it whenever you want as well. So if we do that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a great example of something that didn't exist 6 months ago, let alone a year ago. Right?
Yeah. That's exactly. I mean, in 6 months' time, I'm not like. I think this, like everybody here agrees, is like you can't get too committed into one thing right now because the sand is shifting everywhere and the technology is evolving so fast. But yeah, that's the path that we see and what we're doing.
I think for us, we started using kind of app-specific roll-ups, I think, quite early. I think it was like early 2022. Partnered with a lot of companies to do this. And then I think The path is definitely just horizontally scaling, but I think each container you would still want to have as many users on kind of this one shard as possible. So if you're thinking about building an MMO, right, like you want to have a couple hundred players on this kind of like one shard, and then you can horizontally scale beyond that to maybe like hundreds of shards if you really need. But I think something that we realized was that like once we scale the complexity of these smart contracts, it was actually very difficult to just scale kind of the load of one kind of shard without really heavily modifying the underlying kind of rollup. I'm talking about just like EVM here, which is why we've kind of taken our own approach to this, which is we're basically building Keystone, which is kind of this infrastructure product that combines a traditional game server with the EVM. So you can think about this as like a thin layer of EVM wrapped around a game engine. So the game engine still has a high tick rate. You can configure this to be as low latency or fastest as possible. And then on top of this, we kind of took like 5% of Geth and then put it on top of this server. So players can still write smart contracts and deploy any smart contract that they would to other public chains. And then they still have kind of access to the underlying data structures that are changing at a much higher rate than I think a normal EVM. We think this is the right approach to scaling first an individual load or like a shard of a server, and then horizontally scaling with that.
I won't reiterate everything that people said, but the thing I'm most concerned about with scaling is like the user experience of moving between blockchains. Like imagine every time you move into a new area in World of Warcraft, you go to like a bridge UI and you have to like send a bridge transaction to like go to a different chain. That's not ideal. So I would like to write programmatic abstractions on top of these things so that players don't know they are happening. So that's just my biggest concern. And also just in terms of raw scalability, Lattice has been doing a lot of work on this, and we're making a big announcement tomorrow at the Autonomous Worlds Assembly. I can't say anything yet, but stay tuned.
That's a problem that we solved, though. You won't even notice the wallet kind of bridging. You'll just kind of just exist.
Nice.
You know?
I should try that. Yeah.
It's not done yet, but that's like that's just an engineering problem that we need to solve, and then that experience will be smooth. Yeah, but it is a hard problem.
Something I'm interested in your thoughts on. So, if you remember the battle between VHS and Beta, and I won't pretend I remember it well, but Beta, as I understand it, was the better video format, and yet VHS won. And I think just because it had been adopted at that point. So do you think we'll end up with something that's good enough rather than always just jumping to the thing that's the best?
That is why I'm EVM maximalist. I think it's like not the best, but everyone's using it, and something would have to literally be 100 times better for someone to switch, and I don't think we've seen that.
I think the EVM is the best like decentralized layer that we can settle to, but yeah, I don't think it's the end game when we're trying to build games though.
Well, you could build that 100x that Andy's talking about, right?
Improve the EVM 100x.
Sorry.
Improve the EVM 100x.
Well, I mean, there could be a 100 times EVM thing at some point that is enough for people to jump to, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay. So the last question actually is on the developer side, right? So what do you think are the problems with the current dev experience if someone wanted to build a fully on-chain game? And what do you think are, how can we leverage all those ecosystems and toolkits out there?
I'm going to give a non-technical answer because these guys will give a technical answer. There's nobody playing these games yet. And so therefore you can't make money from them, and therefore how do you run a business? And I'm bullish about what we're doing, but that is for me the biggest problem with building autonomous worlds and fully on-chain games. It just doesn't have a large market. There's 3 billion people in the world that play games, and there's probably 1,000 that are playing fully on-chain games. And so, that to me is like a big gap, and we don't need 1 billion people playing, but we need to improve the quality of the games such that, and by improve the quality, I don't necessarily mean production values. I think we need to do something that's really genuinely new and interesting and gamers care about, not because it's on-chain, but just because it's cool. And so for me, that's the biggest challenge, which is to build things that attract a larger audience.
But yeah, with the DevX of building on-chain games, I mean, it's basically been an exponential curve. I mean, 2 years ago, pre-Mud, pre-Dojo, pre-Curio, like it was a nightmare. You had to do everything. And now, you know, if you know a bit of React, know how to write a smart contract, you can build a prototype in like a weekend. And that's kind of like my metric that I like driving on everything that we're doing at Dojo is like how fast can you get to a game. And so everything we do is and all the tooling that we build, it focuses on that. And so yeah, it's really easy now. Now you can spin up a remote DevNet, instantly, and then share your game with other people. That was very hard to do like 18 months ago.
Yeah, I think I agree with David here that I think most of the tech challenges are being solved quite quickly, whether it's like spinning up your own contracts or a net or servers or whatnot. Yeah, I think most of the challenges comes from just, because I think most people building in this space come from a traditional engineering background, including like myself. So we're not really exposed to, I think, a lot of the, operation sides of things for games, whether it's, just like really the business side, the marketing side, the go-to-market side, I think distribution is like one thing that's just not cracked at all yet in Web3 games. So I think those are the bigger barriers than I think the tech. The tech is definitely already there to make a sufficiently fun game. I think that will just take time. Yeah.
Yeah, we just don't have a lot of examples to lean on. Like we don't have a large history of games that we can compare ourselves to. Like really all I compare myself to is Dark Forest, and like, yeah, the scale of Dark Forest was not that huge, the complexity was not that huge, and that's really all I'm going off of. So it really just feels like every day you open your code editor and you're like, what's gonna happen? I don't know. There could be a fucking monster around this corner and that's gonna consume 3 weeks of my life, and that's just not a fun, secure feeling to go into work to.
Okay. All right, we are running out of time here. So yeah, that will be all for today's discussion. Thank you all again for being here. And also it's really insightful discussions. Hope that we can connect later.
Thank you.
All right.